Okay, we're live. Okay, hey everyone. Thank you so much for joining our third session of the Lee County Ready for College initiative. We're so excited that we're continuing this program and helping students with new things about the college admissions process. So the first thing is I just want to mention thanks for those that have watched the procrastination video last week. We know like that should probably be one of the first things that you should be considering and thinking about, because at the end of the day, it is this one time like application process. Not necessarily one time, but it's probably the best time to apply for college if you intend to doing it. And if you want more information, just go back and look at the videos. So this topic for our video today is on building your resume. So one thing to think about is that colleges receive so many great applications, which is why it's important to highlight what you are like as a person and what you have done in the past 4 years. Everyone has their own story and their own personal obstacles that they've had to overcome and use as their drive towards success. So your resume should definitely tell them about who you are and your experiences in a very concise way. So we're going to do introductions for everyone. So like in past videos, my name is Steven. I'm a rising senior at Duke, majoring in statistics and minoring in German and sociology. Chandler?
My name is Chandler. I'm a senior at UNCW, and I'm majoring in economics and Spanish.
My name is Taylor. I just graduated from Barton College with a degree in biology, and I'm heading to the University of Georgia to pursue my PhD.
My name is Kay. I currently attend NC State. I'm majoring in elementary education with a special education add-on licensure.
Thank you, everyone. So particularly on this video about building a resume, like these three like have a lot of experience like writing them and know much about the format that they should be written in. So definitely take their advice, because it's really good. And I just want to mention a quick disclaimer. Like we mentioned before, like we are not professionals. We don't get paid to do this. This is simply just us giving advice about our experiences, and you take what you can get from that information. So yeah, feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation, because like through the comments, like we'll be able to answer them and reply to them and things like that. So yeah. So the first thing that we're going to talk about, so Chandler, would you mind discussing more about the resume template, what it looks like, and what are some things that are really important to mention?
Yeah, I'm actually going to share my screen to start going over this. So if you don't mind just holding on for that for just a second. All right, awesome. So the first thing I want to mention just before we start is that you are going to need a resume as soon as possible. You're going to need it for internships, for jobs, volunteer opportunities, maybe even for certain applications. So go ahead and start working on that. All right, so at the beginning, I just want to mention that the largest thing on your resume should be your name. If anything, you want them to remember your name. Next, you're going to want to have contact information, phone number, email, and then if you have a LinkedIn, I highly recommend making a LinkedIn. It's a great networking opportunity, but that can be saved for another video. But also put that there if you do have that. So you're going to want to use a resume template. It does not make sense to craft a resume from scratch. There are plenty of templates. We're actually going to give access to this one. This is a UNCW provided template. So just make sure you're using one of those. You're going to want to use, black and white. Unless you're a marketing or graphic design major, you're going to want to use typical standard black and white, center aligned, very easy to read. So one thing I want to mention is that when you're talking about your positions and describing them, you're going to want to use bullet points. You're going to want to make sure you're careful with the tenses. So if you're currently in the position, as in this example right here, you're going to want to use present tense. If you have done the position in the past and you're no longer doing it, you're going to want to use past tense, and make sure you're consistent with the tensing the entire position. So that's really important. Consistency is key. It's always going to be under or exactly at one page. You do not want to go over a page. 1-inch margins. And some things that you're going to want to include in your resume include a summary of qualifications. So this should be about 3 to 5 bullets, just talking about like some of your top skills, pretty much selling yourself like in the very beginning. That's always going to go at the top. If you do choose to include that, you don't have to, but I think it's very helpful because it kind of is like an eye catcher. It's kind of a good summary of what you are. And it's a good way to sell yourself for that certain position. You're going to want to always change your resume for each position you're applying for because, if you're applying for an internship, you're going to want to sell different skills than if you're applying for a volunteer position. So this is just a really good way. This is something that you're going to want to change each time. So next we're going to do education. You're going to want to include your graduation year, your major. You're going to want to include your GPA if it's above a 3. That's the general rule. If it's good, include it. Above a 3, good. Don't include it if it's under a 3. Any concentrations or minors you have. And then something that I think is really helpful, like really good way to sell yourself, is just like successful performance as a student while working. Any honors, you might not have honors as a high school student, but a lot of people do. Like you can put any scholarships you earned here. You can put, I know I put AP Scholar on mine if you earned a 3 or more on an AP exam. As a high school student, you might not have internship experience, but as you go through college, you might earn some of that. It's a good thing to put on there. Leadership is a great thing to put on there coming out of high school. Any service experiences, and next, work experience is a great thing to do. And then something that not a lot of people include, you can, if you need a filler in your resume, is activities. So it's just important to keep in mind the main thing is you want to keep it at a page. They're not going to read more than a page. And it's pretty easy to keep it at a page. You can just cut out any filler words, keep the descriptions, bullet point, short and simple, and make sure you're consistent with the tenses. That's pretty much all I have to say on that. If there's any questions, you're welcome to leave them in the chat.
Yeah. And I think just a couple things that I do want to bring up. I guess for more so education, Chandler, like what do you think is the best way that students can, format it, especially like as high school students? There's only so much that you can talk about like Southern Lee High School or Lee Senior. Like, what do you think in terms of like important information to mention should there be for like the education?
I think if you have a good GPA and a good class rank, that's something that you could include. Any extracurricular activities. I think working is a really big thing. A lot of high school students work. I think that's a big thing that you can include, that you were able to successfully, pass your classes and graduate and while working. I think that's a really great accomplishment. And just, you can literally like any extracurricular you do, like if you babysit, if you're in a club, if you have a job, you can put anything on a resume, and it's impressive that it shows anything that can show like you can handle multiple tasks at one time. I think is a good thing to put on there. And any honors.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I guess the next thing that we'll be going to, thanks so much, Chandler, for sharing that and to be able to go through that. So Kay, can you talk a little bit about the do's and the don'ts, and I guess kind of reflecting like what Chandler just showed us, like what are some things that, you've specifically done that would be like worth mentioning on the resume too? I think that'd be super helpful.
Okay. I also want to add to something Chan said about putting work on your resume. A lot of times, whenever you go to interviews and stuff for scholarships or like other jobs or anything for college, they'll ask you about your experiences at work, because at work you come across different people you don't know who have different backgrounds than you. So they'll want to know like how you handle these situations and how you are able to interact with people you don't know. So that's something colleges really look for, because when you go to college, you meet all kinds of new people. So knowing how to interact with them is something they really look for. But I'm going to go ahead and get into the do's and don'ts. You should always remember that different majors have different requirements. So a business major's resume will not look the same as an education major's resume, or someone who's done a lot of STEM work or anything along those lines. So an education major's resume may involve more volunteering they've done in different school settings, while a business major may involve a lot of different things they've done in maybe like an office they've volunteered in or anything along those lines. Also, to just add to what Chan was saying, use bullet points, not paragraphs, because bullet points are easier for people to read instead of putting like long paragraphs on your resume. A lot of times the resume is just to give them an overview of who you are. When they talk to you, that's when they'll learn more about who you really are. include job descriptions. So talk about what you have done in your job and the different things you've had to do, like your task in your job and any kind of like leadership positions you've held in them, and like just descriptions of like what you actually do at work. So maybe like handling a drawer if you're a cashier or anything along those lines. Next, also Chan mentioned it, but to include your GPA, also remember to include the scale that it is on. Because sometimes different high schools have different scales, so you don't always know, like, if you put like a 3.5, that could be out of 4, but it also could be out of 5 for some people. Next, also to add with the GPAs, if you don't feel comfortable adding your GPA, you don't always have to. You also want to quantify things in numbers. So in your descriptions, if you were a cashier, maybe saying, I handled a drawer with $1,000 in it, or I handled a drawer that had like exact amounts also help a lot. Or if you're a supervisor or a training member on your team at your job, just saying like I overseen 10 people during each shift, or I had to train an average of 4 people each week, or something along those lines, because it gives them specifics to what you've actually done. And also just don't use I in your resume, because your name's at the top, so they already know who you are, and they know they already know whose resume they're reading. So to re-say I, you just don't need to do it.
Yeah.
Next I'll go into some tips.
Oh wait, Kay, I
So
have a
one thing
couple of
I
things.
always do.
I think
Okay,
one
go ahead.
thing that's really important that Kay brought up is, like not only don't use I, but also you do have limited space on your resume. So you definitely want to, think about, how am I going to make the best use of this space? So that way, one, it's not, overbearing with a lot of words, with a lot of information, and then it gets right to the point. Well, I'll mention a couple of, resources like in your accounts, so that way you have access to like kind of what I mean by this. Um, and also, like, some of the things that were mentioned were work descriptions. So when, not everyone has had experience like working, but an overwhelming like amount of students from Lee County like do work in jobs like either in fast food services, or just in general, like not more like, I did software engineering or anything like that. So like, and colleges will understand this. They don't expect you to be, the most like amazing prolific student that has done all these amazing things. But even small things like, oh, I was a lifeguard at the pool, and I worked a couple of these hours, and I worked with students, like very like they want to see things like that. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that really quickly before Kay went into the tips.
Something I just want to add to that is, even though these jobs, they might seem rather trivial to you or other people, you can make them seem like the greatest thing in the world just with your words, like with a good description. Like, I worked at Chick-fil-A, which is just, it's a fast food place, it's a job. But the way that I described my resume, I was like, I handled thousands of dollars worth of product a day efficiently, like with little to no mistakes. And I was like, I managed the drive-through, and the speed was 15% higher than it used to be. Like, just taking your time to like learn how to describe something, rather than just saying, oh, I took orders, or oh, I gave out food. It can make a really big difference. And especially, like Kay said, quantifying things makes a big difference. It makes you seem like you did a lot more. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, now I'll go into the tips. So one tip I will give is to update your resume as you have new experiences. So let's say you're starting a new volunteering position or a new job, like add it to your resume as soon as you start, so you don't forget things along the way. Because many times I'm trying to update my resume and I look and I'm like, okay, well, I haven't updated this in like a year, and sometimes you just forget all that you have done in the time. Next, just remember you'll have to change it each time. So whenever you are uploading a resume to different positions, you won't upload the same resume. So Chan was saying this as well, if you're applying for an internship, it wouldn't be the same as if you're applying to like a volunteer job. So each job, you'll have to bring something different to the table. So just remember that on each resume, you should personalize it for each experience that you're applying to. So next is where to find good templates for resumes. We're going to leave a link for you. So the one that Chandler was screen sharing earlier, you'll be able to use that one, but you can also access many on the internet if you don't know where else to find them. They also have them on like Google and Word docs, but always remember to change it to a PDF whenever you're uploading it, because PDFs open the same over many different computers, so it will be a good way to upload it. And you should always keep a copy in more than one place. So like if your computer crashes and you lose everything on your computer, you upload it to like a Google Drive or a Dropbox, and you'll be able to access it again and edit it if you need to in the future if you ever do lose it. And also, if you're never sure like what to put onto a resume, you can always look it up, or you could reach out to us at any time. And just remember to add references to your resume. Some templates have references where you can add it, but some do not. I know I've been told that you can add them or you can't. Whenever they talk to you, they'll ask more about it. So you just kind of have to fill it out and go from there. And a lot of times you have leadership positions throughout high school. So adding those to your resume also make you look better, because it shows that you know how to work with others and you know how to give advice and just be in the community as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kate. Those were like so helpful tips, and I like honestly like everyone like really consider the things that she said, because you know like all of this overwhelming like discussion of like, oh, I didn't know how to make a resume, or I didn't know how to do some of these things. One thing to also keep in mind is that like, you know, if some scholarship applications do require resumes, and if you want that scholarship, like, and let's say you already have a deadline for a college application, it's probably good to always have it handy and ready. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention, like right before we move on to Taylor, is that, um, maybe some of you won't be applying to these certain scholarships or certain job positions. But one thing to always consider is that the common application does require that you list, your extracurricular activities. And if you already have your resume in place, like that serves as like a template for how you want to organize and list those things, especially the description boxes, because you've already thought about like, oh, I was president of Key Club, or I was vice president of DECA, or I was a member on the swim team or a member on the volleyball team. Just having those things in mind and like what you did is really important, because again, like you can't mention and list every single thing that you did. So you also do want to mention the ones that were most important to you and your experiences, because it does reflect more about your character. Because Kay also mentioned this, like the thing that you're applying for, like they will bring that up. They'll be like, oh, what do you mean by you did this thing? Can you talk more about that? Like your resume shouldn't just be, information about just like all the information about you. It should just be guiding words. So that way when an employer or a scholarship like reviewer looks at it, they're like, oh, like this is such an interesting thing. Like, can you talk more about this experience? That way you already have in preparation, like, okay, I remember what I did to condense this, and I'm going to talk more about it during the interview. So yeah, so moving on from that, Taylor is going to be talking about cover letters and personal statements. And yeah.
Hi, everyone. So similar to resumes, some applications may ask that you submit a cover letter or a personal statement. And they are very similar in some ways to resumes. And one of the most important things is that they're also just a page long. So I'm actually going to go ahead and share my cover letter with you. So give me one moment. I pull that up. And I want to let you know, so I did black out my contact information. So you should include your contact information, but I blacked mine out so you wouldn't see it all. So at the very top, you'll see my name. And that is the largest thing on my cover letter because that is the most important thing. You'll have 4 sections for a cover letter. Before I get there, though, you'll see that it's addressed. So you'll address it to where you're applying, and you'll date it as well. And then you'll say to whoever. So I was applying for a consultant position with a sorority, and you don't want to say to whom it may concern. That is the worst thing that you could say. You want to make it personal. So if you have to do a little bit of research to find out who the hiring person is, I could not find the actual name of the person, so I listed the hiring team. And then you go into your 4 main sections. What are you applying to and why? So here I was applying to a consultant position because I really like the sorority and my advisor suggested it. And then next, you're going to go into your educational accomplishments and relevant leadership roles. Here I mentioned where I was graduating from with my undergrad and leadership roles that I had had within the sorority and other relevant ones on campus, like Student Government Association. The third section should talk about your specific strengths and skills with context. You don't just want to list qualities that you have. So you don't want to say you have good time management. You want to say how you have good time management. And you don't want to say you delegate well. You want to talk about, you delegate to people around you so you don't get overwhelmed and things like that. You want to be more specific. And then finally, for your cover letter, you want to thank them for their consideration. And again, you want to be specific here because a lot of people will say, thanks, I hope to hear from you soon. Hope you consider me. So here I said, I look forward to the possibility of working with you because then I'm positive and they're going to remember that a lot more than someone who says, I look forward to hearing from you because 99 out of 100 of those applications are going to say that. And again, you don't include everything on your cover letter that is in your resume. So I wrote, my resume is included in the application as well. So if you need more information about me, you can look there and then you sign it. So the best way to do it is to print it off. If you have a scanner, that works great. There's also some apps on your phone that you can use to scan it and email it to yourself because you want to be able to sign it because that makes it more personal. So you try and leave 4 spaces in between your sincerely and then your full name, and you sign it in between that space as well. So that looks really good. So those are some good tips for your cover letter. And now I'm going to switch over to showing you a personal statement. So give me another moment to pull that up. And again, of course, marked off those contact informations, but definitely include them so they can contact you. So a personal statement goes a little more in depth than a cover letter. Again, the main difference I feel like from resumes and cover letters and personal statements is you're not using bullet points. You are using paragraph form. You're going more in depth, full sentences and things like that. So for a personal statement, again, 1 page long and similar to a cover letter, you have 4 main sections to include. The first one is why you're interested and what you want to study. So I was applying to the University of Georgia for a grad school program and talked about the research interests that I'm interested in. You should really include personal stories and details. This makes you seem like a real person and you're not just someone on a piece of paper. They can kind of start to visualize who you are and get to know you through your application. Your next step, the next section you want to talk about is why you're interested in applying to this specific school. There are lots of grad schools. Why am I applying to the University of Georgia? So I talked about how it meets my research desires. The best thing that you can do is include specific professors that you want to work with. If you're applying, this is for undergrad, you can talk about scholarship programs or internships that they have available, specific courses that they offer. And this specific personal statement, I included the motto of the school. Not every school has a motto, but definitely look at those things to make you stand out more. And then the third section, why you would be the perfect addition to campus or to that job. You should also include past or current school involvement here or community service. Here, it's okay to summarize some key points from your resume. So again, I talked about some of my leadership experiences on campus and in a sorority. I talked about some of my research experience that I had. So if you're applying to undergrad, talk about any leadership you had in high school. You can talk about skills you learned when working at a job or things of that nature. And then finally, what specific skills you have that help you stand out. So here again, include leadership in detail, talk about jobs, talk about any internships that you've had or shadowing. So for example, if you want to be a vet, so you're going to college for that, maybe you interned at a local veterinary office and you can talk about that experience. Even if it was just helping clean out animal cages, you were able to get that work experience. If you want to be a nurse or even a doctor and you worked as a CNA, including that experience knows that you have work experience, hands-on, things like that. And that's what they really enjoy. And that is pretty much all that I have for personal statements and cover letters. I do really quick want to plug also, I didn't mention it before, so sorry for getting off topic, but elevator speeches. So if you go in for an interview for a job or something, the first question a lot of people will ask you is, tell me about yourself. And that can be very difficult. So you want to try and plan an elevator speech and basically just summarize your resume in 1 minute. And so you can talk about yourself, talk about your experiences and why you'd be the best candidate. And that is the best way to answer that question.
Yeah, that's a really, really good thing to bring up, Taylor. That's an excellent thing. And we'll definitely be talking about this later in the summer. We have a session called Scholarships and Interviews, where we will go into full detail more about, that personal interaction that you'll be having with an individual. Or depending on how, the coronavirus ends up going in the fall session, most of them might be on Zoom or on other online platforms, which will be very, very different and, non-traditional to what we've experienced in past years. So I know for example, Kay, she's a Goodnight Scholar at NC State. She had to do some scholarship interviews and have to present information from her resume, but not only in that way, it's in front of a person. So they see your face, they see your emotions, they see your intonation, they see how you're trying to present yourself in front of them. And it's a whole different ballpark. So no, that's a really good thing to bring up, Taylor. So I guess now that we're moving into, our conclusion, all of us, that was such a good thing to bring up in terms of resume building, tips and tricks for making sure that you stand out, and moving into more of those advanced types of papers that you have also for you. For example, the cover letters and the personal statements, because they are a bit overwhelming to think about. But in general, probably the resume will be more useful, especially as a high school student that's transitioning into college. So yeah, I just wanted to mention our fact of the week. So apparently, not necessarily apparently, you have to, in the state of North Carolina, show that you have North Carolina residency, because that, if you qualify for it, gives you, the opportunity to receive in-state tuition versus out-of-state tuition, and you save significantly more money than if you didn't apply it. In fact, it's required to do that before you begin applying for college. So always take that into consideration. You can go to ncresidency.org to get more information about that. So I guess I just wanted to, open up the floor a little bit. So I guess also Chandler, Kay, or Taylor, do you all have any final thoughts or things you want to mention before, we close off, for anyone that has been brought up? Yeah. Okay.
I have this one, sorry. I think it's already vaguely been mentioned, but I do want to mention the resume. You're not going to be able to put every single thing you've ever done on there. You're going to want to save. It's supposed to be a good summary and encapsulation of you and your qualifications for that whatever position you're applying for. But you're always going to want to have more stuff to talk about when you go to an interview. Just like Taylor said, you're going to want to have that elevator speech. You're going to want to have more experiences and things that you've learned from the stuff that's on your resume. You're not going to want to go into an interview or anything and just recite what's on your resume. There's way more to you than what's on this piece of paper, and just remember that this is just a summary that you're selling yourself. basically on a resume, but it's not. There's way more to you than that, and you're gonna want to be able to talk about more than that, and talk about more how these experiences shaped you as a person when you go into these interviews. And that's all I wanted to say, just because that's something I kind of learned the hard way when I went into my first interview. I kind of just thought like my resume was me, and I needed to learn how to apply my experiences from my resume into an interview, into a new position. Basically, that's all I wanted to say.
No, that's such an important thing to mention. Like, you want to show that you're a human, that you're not just like a bunch of numbers on paper. And yeah, I've definitely been in an interview like that, Chandler, when I literally just like said everything that was on my resume, and they're like, okay, but like, why do you want to major in this? And that was actually a college interview for Dartmouth, which is an Ivy League. And I literally just stood there and I was like, okay, I have no idea what to say. And like, I apologized to him. So I think that's so important. Yeah, like, really, really be more introspective with, you know, what you put on that paper and what you're actually going to be telling someone more about you and your passions in life. And also conversely, I think if you don't have a lot of things to say on your resume or, you know, on your cover letter, one thing that you could always do is, just having more like deeper like questions about like, what do I spend time working on? Do I go to church? What do I do at church? Like, how does that shape the way in which I want to do things in life? Those are just some things to consider before we close off. And the good thing about this is that next week, our next video that we'll be having on Wednesday at 7 p.m. is about your story and how to stand out for colleges, which goes in really well. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. And if you're watching this later, please do not feel afraid to email us. All of our email information should be on the website. And yeah, we're expecting a bunch of emails from you throughout the semester if you're going to be watching this later. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in, everyone.
Thank you.